The garage door hums up on rusted rails and stops halfway, jammed on a track nobody has oiled in a decade. You under it anyway. Your flashlight finds a shape under a canvas cover, low and long, and your watch reads 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the transport truck outside starts its engine, whether you're ready or not. Under that canvas is a 1963 car worth more than the house it's parked in, and somewhere on this property, in a drawer or a safe or a shoebox, is a set of factory-build sheets that will tell you if it's real. This is not a story about cars. This is a story about what people do when the thing they love the most becomes the thing they can no longer afford to keep. You are not a repo man. You'd correct anyone who called you that quietly without raising your voice, because the word carries a violence that has nothing to do with what you actually do. A repo man takes a car off a curb at 3 a.m. with a tow hook and a getaway plan. You spend 4 hours with white cotton gloves and a boroscope, verifying that the numbers stamped into a block match the numbers on a title, before anyone so much as touches a strap to the chassis. Repo men, in minutes. You work patience. The canvas comes off in your hands like a held breath finally let go. Steel blue paint, dulled by 8 years of storage dust, but underneath the dust, still perfect. You already know the chassis number by heart. You memorized it on the drive over, the way a '90s professional memorizes a name before walking into a room. You kneel by the front fender, find the stamped plate, and read it under the flashlight. It matches. Somewhere behind you, a man is standing in a bathrobe on the porch, watching a stranger confirm that his grandfather's car is exactly what he always said it was. You get calls at strange hours, from strange numbers, from lenders whose names you will never say out loud to anyone outside this business, because discretion is the entire product you sell. Collector car lending is not the world most people imagine. It is not a bank teller stamping a form. It is specialty finance houses, outfits that operate the way certain agriculture lenders or fine art lenders operate, financing an asset against its appraised value instead of a paycheck. A collector brings in a car worth $400,000. The lender advances against a fraction of that, sometimes structures it as a revolving line secured against an entire private collection instead of a single vehicle, the same way a business might draw against inventory. The loan written, the years pass, and somewhere in those years, a divorce happens, or a business fails, or a medical bill arrives that nobody budgeted for, and the payments stop. That's where you begin. You didn't grow up around money like this. You grew up around a different kind of engine. Your father's, a 2-door coupe he rebuilt 3 times over your childhood because he could never afford to buy the finished version of the car he wanted, only the pieces. You learned to read a chassis number off that car before you learned to read a clock. And when the bank finally took it, not seized it violently, just quietly, a flatbed on a grey Tuesday morning while you stood on the porch in socks, you remember 2 things with total clarity. You remember your father not saying a single word the entire time, and you remember the driver of that flatbed being gentle, careful, the straps, treating the car even in the act of taking it away like it still mattered. You decided, standing there, that if you were ever the one holding the clipboard, you would be that kind of person, not the bank driver, the one who understood that what he was moving wasn't steel, it was somebody's proof that their life had once gone right. That single morning built the 2 rules you have never broken since. You verify everything twice before you ever touch a vehicle, because a wrong seizure destroys a life for no reason at all. And you never let a collector watch the car actually leave the property, if you can help it, not out of coldness, but because you know exactly what that image does to a person. And you've spent your whole career trying to spare people the one memory that never fades. The first real case that taught you the difference between a job and a puzzle came from a lender you'll call Meridian Fine Asset, not its real name. None of these ever will be, regarding a 1967 coupe held as sole collateral against a $210,000 line of credit. The borrower had missed 11 months of payments and stopped answering calls entirely. Standard file. Except when you pulled the original appraisal photos to cross-reference before the recovery, something in the engine bay didn't sit right. The appraisal, done 4 years earlier, showed a numbers-matching engine, original casting marks, a factory date code stamped into the block exactly where it belonged. The photos you took standing in that same garage showed an engine that was almost identical. Same color, same decals, same error-correct carburetor, except the casting number was off by 2 digits, and the date code was stamped at a slightly different depth, like it had been done with a different tool in a different decade. You didn't accuse anyone. You photographed everything, logged the discrepancy, and drove 4 hours to a specialist who had spent 30 years authenticating engines for auction houses. He confirmed it in under 10 minutes. A correct for-year replacement block, expertly done, good enough to fool a fast appraisal, not good enough to fool a slow one. The car was valuable. It was no longer the exact car the loan had been written against. You didn't seize it in anger. You seized it as evidence in a much larger reappraisal, and the lender renegotiated the loan against the vehicle's true, honest value instead of an inflated one. The borrower, oddly, thanked you. He said he'd always suspected the block wasn't original. The man he bought the car from years earlier had been evasive about it, and that he'd rather know the truth than keep pretending. You learned that day that recovery work is rarely about villains. It's about unwinding stories people told themselves, sometimes for years, sometimes just to survive. The second case raised the stakes considerably, because this time the mystery wasn't in the metal, it was in the paperwork, and the deadline was real. A regional lender you'll call Colston Heritage held a line of credit secured an entire private collection, 9 vehicles, 1 address, 1 aging collector who had built the group over 4 decades and was now, according to his family, in the early stages of losing track of his own affairs. Payments had lapsed. The lender needed the collection inventoried, verified, and prepared for climate-controlled storage within 72 hours, before a family dispute over guardianship could freeze the entire estate in litigation and make the vehicles legally untouchable for years. You arrived to find 9 bays, 8 cars. The 9th bay held only a chalk outliner positions on a concrete floor that had clearly not moved in a long time, and a service invoice, 18 months old, for detailing and photography, off-site. No delivery address. No date. You worked the invoice like a thread, called the detailing shop, and learned the car, a rare open-top roadster, arguably the single most valuable vehicle in the entire collection, had been picked up by a family friend for what was described as a private sale that never closed. The collector, when you gently asked him about it, lit up with genuine, unclouded memory, the fog lifting for exactly as long as it took him to describe the car in loving, specific detail, right down to the exact shade of its interior stitching. He remembered every bolt on that car. He did not remember who had taken it, or when, or why. You had 60 hours left on the clock, and a missing 7-figure vehicle with no paper trail. You didn't panic. You went back to basics, the thing that always works when nothing else does. You pulled state title transfer records, cross-referenced the VIN against recent registration filings in 3 neighboring states, and found it. A title transfer, 6 months old, to a small classic car brokerage 200 miles away, filed by someone holding an expired, informal power of attorney the family had never properly revoked. It wasn't theft in the way people picture theft. It was a gray zone exploitation of a family's trust during a moment of vulnerability. You flagged it, documented every step, and handed the paper trail to the lender's legal team and the family's attorney together in the same room at the same time, so there could be no dispute about what the evidence actually showed. The car came back before the guardianship hearing closed the window. The collector never fully understood how close he came to losing it forever. In a strange way, you were glad. Some things are kinda left unexplained. The third case is the one that stayed with you the longest, because it was the first time the human cost of this work stopped being a background detail and became the entire foreground. The vehicle was a mid-century sports car, financed year against a line of credit that had funded a small business. Not the car itself, the business, with the collection pledged as backup security the borrower never expected would actually be called. The business failed during a downturn nobody could have predicted. The payments stopped. You drove out to a modest house in a modest neighborhood, nothing like the estates from the first 2 cases, and you understood immediately that this wasn't a wealthy collector protecting a hobby. This was a man who had bet everything, lost, and was now down to one beautiful, useless, financially catastrophic object sitting under a carport. He met you at the door before you knocked. He already knew why you were there. He didn't argue. He didn't stall. He asked for 1 hour alone with the car before the transport arrived, not to hide anything, not to strip a part off it, just to sit in the driver's seat one more time with the door closed. You gave him the hour. You stood by a truck in the heat, and you let the silence do what silence does. When the transport driver finally licked the enclosed trailer up the driveway, soft straps ready, climate-controlled interior, already running to protect the car from the summer heat during the trip, the man stood on his porch, not his lawn, not close enough to touch it, and watched, the exact way your father once had. You realized, watching him, that you had become the driver from your own childhood, without ever fully deciding to. And you understood, in that moment, more clearly than you ever had before, why you'd built your 2 rules and why you would never break them for convenience, no matter how routine this job became. This is not a story about cars. This is a story about the 12 months between a decision made in hope and a phone call made in silence, and about the strangers like you who stand in that gap. By now, this work has scaled far beyond any single job, any single collector, any single quiet driveway. Across a career doing this, you've walked into storage units, converted airplane hangars, underground garages beneath city apartment buildings, a decommissioned bank vault, once repurposed by an eccentric owner to hold 4 cars and nothing else. You've handled recoveries ranging from a modestly priced project car worth barely more than the loan against it, to a single vehicle whose appraised value alone exceeded 8 figures, insured in transit under a policy with more zeros than most people's mortgages. You've worked with soft-strap enclosed carriers specifically designed never to touch bare paint, climate-controlled facilities holding humidity within a few percentage points and temperature within a couple of degrees, because thermal cycling alone can crack decades-old lacquer that no amount of money can perfectly restore. You've learned to read a chassis stamp under raking light to catch a re-stamp that a straight-on photograph would miss entirely. You've built relationships with marque historians, engine specialists, upholstery experts who can date a stitch pattern to within a 2-year window just by touch. None of it glamorous. All of it is exact, because exactness is the only thing standing between a fair recovery and a devastating mistake. Which brings you back to garage, to the canvas cover in your hands, to the 13 minutes on the clock that are now down to 4. The chassis matches, the engine casting matches, the build sheet, when you finally find it, not in a drawer, but taped to the inside of a workbench cabinet, exactly where a careful, sentimental owner might hide something he never wanted lost, confirms everything the lender's file already claimed. This is the car. It is exactly what it says it is. There is no fraud here, no gray area, no missing chapter. Just a man who fell behind, and a lender who is owed, and a machine that is about to leave a garage it has sat in for 8 quiet years. The transport driver backs the enclosed trailer up the narrow driveway with the kind of care that only comes from doing this job for a very long time. The soft straps go on exactly where they belong, never across the paint, never under tension against the bodywork, cradling the frame the way the manufacturer's own engineers once intended it to be lifted. You watch the ramp fold up, you watch the doors close, and you glance toward the porch, out of habit more than necessity, expecting to see the owner standing there the way they almost always do. He isn't there. He's already gone back inside, and through the window you can see him sitting at a kitchen table, both hands flat on the wood, not moving, not watching. You realize, standing in that driveway with the engine of the transport truck idling behind you, that the kindest thing you have ever learned to do in this line of work is to let a man decide for himself whether he wants to watch the ending of his own story. You climb into your own vehicle. You check your watch out of the same old habit, though there's no deadline left to beat. Somewhere behind you, a trailer pulls away carrying a piece of someone's history toward a climate-controlled warehouse where it will wait, safe and undamaged, for whatever comes next. A resale, a settlement, maybe someday even a buyback, if the man at that kitchen table ever finds his way back to solid ground. You think, not for the first time, about your father standing in socks on a porch, and about the driver who was gentle with the straps. You think about how many mornings like this one it took before you finally understood that being careful with the metal was never really the point. The metal was never what needed protecting. The garage door behind you creaks back down on its broken track, stopping halfway again, same as it started, like nothing has changed at all. But something has left this place that will never come back to it. You put the truck in gear and pull away slowly, the way you always do, giving the house one last look in the mirror. Not because the job requires it, but because some part of you still remembers what it feels like to be the one left standing on the porch, watching a taillight disappear down a driveway that suddenly feels much too quiet.